I'm very pleased you could stop by today. You recently completed a film with Farley Granger.
That's right. Film called Death Mask. That's with Farley Granger, and Danny Aiello was in it, and Ruth Warwick. Nice film. It's a suspense drama, police suspense. It's a good film. I hope we'll be seeing it soon. I think United Artists might be distributing it.
Was it filmed here in New York?
Yes. We filmed it sometime last summer. I guess it's getting close to be a year now. And we filmed New York, locations in Brooklyn, Staten Island, all over.
How did you find Farley Granger and Ruth Warwick, who were certainly very seasoned to work with?
Oh, Ruth is wonderful. Now, I didn't have a scene with her. I did all my scenes with Farley Granger, and he's lovely, very charming man, very sweet guy. So it was very fun to be able to work with him. And Ruth Warwick did an excellent performance. And of course, I met Danny Aiello after the fact. He shot on different days than I had too, and he's very exciting performer.
How would you describe your role?
Well, it's very funny. Ever since I'm mostly noted for my adult film roles.
Right.
And now that I'm playing the R-rated parts, I'm the mother. Yeah, I've become everyone's mother. I played a great role. It was it's pivotal. Basically, the story is finding the body of a small child, and this one man's obsession with finding the circumstances of his death, how he got there, finding his parents, and what have you. I'm the woman that they find in the end. We find out that it was my child, and you see the circumstances as to how the child died in the first place.
Sounds like a wonderful acting part.
It was marvelous. It was marvelous, and we had a little flashback, which was supposed to have happened about 10 years earlier. So I was very thrilled to get it.
It was done by an independent producer?
Yes. Richard Friedman was the director. And it was written by Richie and Jeff Goldberg. And
you're going to be producing a film yourself in the very near future?
Yes. That film's called Island Fire, and we're hoping to produce that hopefully in a couple of months down in Jamaica. It's a wonderful movie. Story about Annie Palmer. They called her the White Witch of Jamaica. Ooh. Now, she's a real lady. She was a legend in Jamaica. I mean, she really happened. She was in the 1800s, and she owned a plantation. She was in control of about 3,000 slaves, and quite a powerful lady, and she practiced witchcraft, and very interesting story, I hope.
And how did you run across this story?
James Ingracia, who is an entertainment attorney and a friend of mine, came up with a project, and we shot the photonovela for it. A photonovela is sort of an adult comic book. It's very popular in Europe and South America. It's for adults, and instead of using sketched pictures, they're actual photographs. So we went ahead and did the photonovela for the story, which is in fact turned out to be the storyboard for the movie. So I like the project, he liked the project, he's got faith in me, and I certainly have faith in him, so I think it's a project we're working on together.
How does one go about getting funding to produce a film?
Various different ways. I'm meeting with a lot of people right now. It seems in the business you run across a lot of people, or in life you run across a lot of business people who are interested in projects and what have you. And I'm lucky enough to know a number of these people, and they want to see me make the transition, and I think they have faith in me.
Let's talk about that a little, because certainly you're probably one of the first adult film actresses to start to actually make a transition. And
well, there are a lot of people in the X-rated business who have appeared in straight roles. And Jamie's really he had a part in Nighthawks. Sharon Mitchell has been in numerous straight films. Nobody's ever really established themselves as a so-called mainstream star, and I'd like to see it happen.
Well, it seems that's the direction you're taking,
right?
And you've certainly started to have success. Do you find that there's a stigma attached to being an adult film star so much now as opposed to...
I think if we would have gone back 5 or 10 years ago, I think it might have been an impossibility. But I think people are more open-minded, and I think they're more willing to accept certain things, and I think it would be something else if I went out and tried to fool everybody and say, my God, that girl, Veronica Hart, sure looks a lot like me. But I'm not. And I did some good, I think some fine movies, and I'm proud of what I've done. I've got nothing to hide. I haven't hidden too much either.
From where do you get your frankness and your honesty?
I don't know. I think through living life, you hopefully learn something, and I try to be as honest as I can.
You grew up in Las Vegas, which when one thinks of it, one doesn't necessarily think people actually grow up there and have childhoods there.
Sure, they don't think about things like schools and supermarkets and what have you.
They just think of glitter and casinos and that sort of thing. How did you find growing up there?
Well, I guess, it was home, so I didn't know any better or anything else. I guess you have a tendency to grow up fast there. It's a very transient town. People are constantly moving in and moving out, and I thought it was just great. If you live there, you're not constantly on the Strip, or you're not always downtown. So it was great. They have a fabulous theater department. I graduated from UNLV, University of Nevada, Las Vegas, and I was very lucky. Got to do numerous stage productions, and I performed in the Eisenhower Theater and Kennedy Center. We won the American College Theater Festival for a couple of years. So
you had started taking dance lessons when you were very young.
Yeah, 7 years old.
Which is what sparked your interest in dance?
Oh gosh, all I can remember is as a 3 or 4 year old just looking at the TV, and every time dancers would come on, my mom would say, "Come on, honey, they're dancing," and I would run in and see what was going on. I've always wanted to dance, and as I started to get older, I became interested in acting as well.
You had said that you were normal while growing up, but not average. How would you explain that?
Well, how would I explain? That's a good question. How would I? I think average seems to connotate blending in with everybody else, and perhaps not standing out. I was always a bit different as a child. First of all, I was always involved in theater, and the thespians always stood out from the rest of the group. I don't know how it was in your school, but they were always a different little sect in high school especially, and I was also a debater. I took speech and forensics, and I was always a little aside. I was very bright when I was a child, and
well, that always sets you aside. Did you find that led to ribbing from the other school children, or? Yeah,
not so much ribbing, but just that they didn't particularly want to associate with me. I was a very obnoxious kid. I was always the kid who was going, I know, teacher, I know. And it took me a while to learn to lay back, and that you don't have to always give the answers.
How did you find that transition, finding a common denominator with the other classmates?
Well, I guess it was becoming an adolescent when I realized that boys liked me. And I found out that they were attracted. And all of a sudden we started getting along real well after that.
You had finished high school relatively early for most people.
Right. I graduated from high school when I was 16. And then I graduated from college when I was 19. I took my 4-year degree in 3 years. So I graduated, and it was either move to Los Angeles or go to New York. And at that time I had been to Los Angeles a lot, going there for concerts, rock concerts, different theatrical events. And I just decided that I needed to do something different. And I traveled all over Europe when I was 18 for one summer. And I'd also gone to Australia. So it was kind of a choice between going back to Australia or to London. And I decided on England, and I lived there for about 3 years.
How did you find the social change from Las Vegas to London?
Well, it wasn't as drastic as the European change. I mean, there was no language barrier. We both spoke the same language, and it was wonderful. I really enjoyed England a whole lot. I think there again, you would stand out being an American, because typically they're more laid back. They're not as ambitious, and I've always had ambition.
And how did you find that as a foreigner? Did you find that ambition and aggression was more helpful to you?
Sure, I think so. It's their economic situation over there. A lot of the people tend to be a little bit defeated before they start, if you're not going to work and you're going to make almost the same money as if you'd put in a full week's work, there's no incentive. So I was very lucky. Plus, I'm only about 5'6", 5'6", not real tall. And in Las Vegas, when I tried to dance in the lines, there was no way. I'd stack my hair up on top of my head, and I'd wear large shoes, and they'd take your shoes off and flatten your hair down, and they'd put you against a wall. And I couldn't even dance any of the lines. But in England, I was fine for modeling. I could model over there. I danced in the cabarets. 5'6" is a good height over there.
Did you find that with English women they were threatened by your success because you were a foreigner?
I don't think so. I hope not. You know.
You'd also managed rock bands in England. How did that start?
Yeah. Well, to be honest, I moved over to England, I think, to find myself the rock musician I had always longed for.
Well, what better place to do it?
Exactly. And I found a group called Largo. And I managed or mismanaged, I don't know how I should say. They never hit the big time, but we played all throughout England, all sorts of different clubs there, and tried but never negotiated a successful recording deal.
When did you decide to pick up from England and come to New York?
I went home first. I went back to Las Vegas, and I was in summer rep there. I played Susie in Wait Until Dark.
Right.
Fabulous role, one of my favorite roles of all time. And I played Lulu in The Birthday Party, in Pinter's Birthday Party. And I was an extra in a film called Going in Style. And the casting director said, you should come to New York. And a gentleman also had read a big article in a newspaper about me, saying that I was a performer and I'd been a model and a dancer and I was in the music business and had plans at that time to stay in it. And he wanted to develop a music business. So I said, my goodness, I better come to New York. Everything seems to be pointing there, which I did.
So what were your first impressions of New York?
My God, look at the buildings. Everything was big. It was more compact than London, and certainly less charming. I found the people at first to be very, very aggressive and somewhat pushy. And when I finally got accustomed to it and acclimated, I found that New Yorkers are pretty right on. If you're blowing it, you'll know immediately. They will not let you get away with murder. But if you really need help and if you really seem to be, in a bad space, they're pretty much there for you. So I think it's a great city. Obviously, I wouldn't have spent the last 5 years here.
How did you deal with the aggression? How did you find out when to put your foot down and start becoming pushy?
Pushy back, right? Well, I'd always been a person who said, oh, never mind, no problems and everything. And I do assert myself sometimes, Now, if somebody pushes me too far, it's really being perhaps nasty. Or if I've made for example, my sister and my nephew, her son, had come into town. Also, my other sister, I had 2 sisters visiting. And we went down to the World Trade Center. And I'd called before, and they told me specifically no jeans. So I got my nephew out of his jeans, and the only pants that we had around were some sweatpants. They weren't dirty, they weren't holey, they looked nice. He looks like a teenage kid, that he does. And we went down there and they weren't going to let him up. And I insisted, and we got in. But if I hadn't have insisted.
Well, sometimes you just need to give that a shove.
Yeah. I don't mean I'm trying to go around pushing people around, no.
Well, you've certainly come out of it very unjaded by it, your experiences in New York. And how do you account for that? Because usually people who come to New York, they become very aggressive and pushy. And yet it seems that you're really not that way. You can be when you need to be, but you can also revert to your old self. How are you able to keep it at an arm's length?
I don't know. I just, personally, I don't like people who get overly impressed with themselves, where they've been, or their importance, because I think it's important to realize that we're all pretty much the same. I don't care what we do. I don't care if somebody's a janitor or the President of the United States. We're all pretty well human, and I don't think anybody's that much beneath or above anybody else. And I don't know. We're all down here together just trying to survive, so try and make it as pleasant as possible.
How did you find New York as a struggling performer?
I didn't really struggle that much here. As I said, I moved out with a so-called legitimate casting director. And with that group of people, I found that it was who was doing what for whom and to whom as to who was getting ahead. And it was very much a game of stabbing each other in the back and fighting for parts, and you know, if you know this guy, you'll get in. And I just didn't want to play that game. It wasn't what I was interested in. Certainly wasn't the way I wanted to live my life. So obviously, our relationship didn't last very long. And my music business fell through. I presented him with a prospectus, and at that point, he said yes, but I need match money. And he was the only investor I knew, so that pretty much took me off of that project. So I became a temporary secretary.
And how long did that last?
I did that for quite a while because it enabled me to work on my other projects. I was still kicking around the idea of an independent record label at that time. And, enough kind of got to be enough. And by chance, the gentleman I rented a room from saw my acting resume, and he saw my modeling pictures, and he said, "You should be in the movies." And he was talking about the adult films, the X-rated movies. Hello? I attract all sorts of things here. And I said, why not? I went down and I saw one of the films, and it was nothing that I objected to. I didn't think it was in bad taste. I, in fact, was thrilled. I mean, I had seen some sort of loops before, you know, and they weren't terribly interesting, but here there were people who were acting. I mean, there were actors and actresses. There were people delivering lines. There was nice production value. There were scripts. These were real movies. And I thought, yes, I'd like to be paid for this. I'd like to do this. I'd like to be paid for acting.
Well, you had said in an interview that it seemed like it was a good idea in that in Hollywood you would probably wind up being thrown around a casting couch with a lot of empty promises.
Right. I never ran into that problem with the adult business. My job a lot of times was performing sex, so I never had to perform to get the job. And that's what I'm finding now. A lot of the people that I've been dealing with, not all people, but many of the people that are so-called legitimate I don't want to associate with. I still don't want to have anything to do with. Right now I'm very monogamous. I've got a wonderful, wonderful baby boy who just turned a year old. His name is Christopher, and I've got a marvelous husband, and that's where my energies are at now. That's basically why I had to get out of the X-rated business. I found myself no longer able to separate my business life from my personal life, and personally, I didn't want to be with anyone else. I really fell in love.
Well, there is that saying that love conquers all.
Sure did something.
But how did the X-rated business change your perception of your sexuality? Because certainly you must have gone through some changes.
Well, you know, I think if anything, I think it was a boost. I think as a performer, there's a certain amount of support we're looking for, outside support or adulation or something like that. And I think having found it with my fans, having people write in and say, I like you, you're good, you're attractive, you're sexy, you're hot, you know. I think that made me feel good. I think it gave me a lot of confidence. And I also, Michael, my husband, also helped support that idea, you know. And I think it enabled me to be able to have a one-on-one relationship, a monogamous relationship. I don't think before that I would have been able to, that I would have been still trying to prove myself as being attractive and desirable. And I don't think that's really conducive to a long-term relationship.
Did he feel threatened by your career at any point, or?
I don't think it's a case of feeling threatened. I think it's something very tough to deal with. He's not any kind of a freak who enjoys watching me make love with other people. That certainly is not the case. I think he enjoys being with an attractive person. I think he enjoys the celebrity-ness that I have. I think that's fun. But it's, I have to give him a lot of credit. I mean, he fell in love with me, but I think it took a lot of guts to marry me. to marry a girl like me. You know what I mean?
How did your parents feel about having a son-in-law?
Marvelous. I think my parents were always very supportive of whatever I was doing in my career and what have you. But I think when they found out that I was getting married, they kind of went, thank goodness.
What direction do you see the erotic film going in? Because one of your best films was Roommates,
right.
And it was really the first crossover film.
Right, that's very interesting because the gentleman who produced and directed Roommates, Chuck Vincent, is now doing a lot of pictures for the Playboy channel. I've finished some of those pictures, and those again are R-rated pictures. I just finished a film called RSVP with him, and I know he's producing another film called Delivery Boys. I had a very small role in, and gosh, I really don't know exactly where the business is going. I think the video cassettes and the home market has changed it very much. You can't depend on a theatrical release right now to bring you in so much money. The X-rated business is not the money maker that it used to be. I think because there's a glut of product on the market right now, and a lot of people are now not even shooting for theatrical release. They're shooting directly on tape and releasing it in the stores, not even bothering with the theaters. I don't know. I think somewhere along the line, the adult industry and Hollywood are probably going to merge. And I don't know if this is going to happen in 5 years or 10 years. What I'd like to see is a film with sex in it. I think that's healthy, and I think that's where our heads should be at. Not a wall-to-wall sex film, although there'll always be a place for that too. But I'd like to see sex put back into its proper perspective. I mean, it's a part of life, and it's a very important part of life, but it's certainly not everything.
Do you think America's attitudes are changing towards erotic films?
You know, I hope so. I hope they're changing towards the performers too, obviously. Or, I mean, that's the position that I'm in right now. Seeing if people will accept somebody who's very open and honest and upfront, and to see if they will support that. I believe it can happen. I mean, I know it is happening. It'll be interesting to see on how large a scale it can happen.
And how receptive do you think they'll be to that from the experience you've had?
I know. See, I'm mostly in contact with my fans, and people are very supportive of what's going on. And they write in, and they've been telling me for a long time, why don't you do other kinds of films? Why aren't you, you're a capable actress, you should be doing other things. And that's what I'm trying to do. That's what I'm trying to do. I love to act, and I'm doing that when I can. I'm also producing and directing for a piece called Electric Blue, which airs on the Playboy channel. And I do that. I imagine I'll probably financially I'll keep producing, and artistically I'll keep acting, and hopefully I'll be going on to bigger and better projects.
What direction do you see yourself going in as an actress from your experience so far?
Oh, I'd like to play anything. I think as an actress you want to be challenged. I just want to play good roles. Who doesn't? What actress doesn't just want to act? I just want to be... I would love the chance to work on perhaps a film that wasn't as low budget, and to work with a couple of the really great directors. Yeah, I'd really like that a lot. I'd like somebody that can take the time and really tell me exactly what he wants and how to get it, because I feel there's a couple of real great performances in there still.
As a professional woman who's also, you're a wife and a mother, do you find it hard to juggle both a career and a home life?
Very tough, Ryan. Very tough. Very tough. I made it very difficult for my husband today. He was teaching uptown, teaching a camera class. He's a director of photography, director, cameraman, lighting director. And I was late coming back, made him late. It's very tough to get to get childcare. Christopher has come with me all over the place. He's made about 4 or 5 different trips back and forth to the coast. He's probably been on about 4 or 5 movie sets already. So he's a well-traveled baby, but he's getting to that age where it's a little difficult to bring him into meetings now. He wants to go and play and knock over everything. So looks like I'm moving to a house right now, and if I can have a nanny or a house helper, it's gonna help a whole lot.
How has being a mother changed your perception of your womanhood?
All I can say, it's the best thing I've ever done in my whole life. And I thank God every day for that little boy. He's, I don't know, anybody who has a child that was really wanted, and it's a child born from a lot of love, I mean, there's nothing like it in the whole world. And it's great. I'm, I'm very thankful.
Well,
Want to have one or two more, actually.
Well,
my husband said, please, we've got to have a vacation first.
Well, hopefully there'll be time for that in the future.
Yeah.
You've been very fortunate, and I really appreciate your time, taking time out today, and your honesty.
Well, thank you very much for having me on your program, Ryan.
Thank you, Veronica. This is Spotlight with Rian Keating, and our guest has been Veronica Hart. If you have any comments or suggestions, you can write to myself in care of Perot Productions, 640 10th Avenue, New York, New York, 10036. Spotlight airs on Manhattan Cable's Channel D Tuesdays at 8:30 in the evening, and on Manhattan Cable's Channel C Saturday mornings at 11:30. Be sure to join us next week when our guest will be singer Joe Maciel, who will be giving us some highlights from his recent cabaret act. Until next week, this is Rian Keating for Spotlight. Thank you.